We all love movies, but the world of entertainment has been shifting over the years, and now our options are broader than ever. We may be waiting for movie theaters to reopen, but in the interim, we've got Netflix, HBO Max, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Hulu, Apple TV Plus, CBS All Access, and more to keep us busy. We've got more incredible movies to be excited about and discuss than ever before, so let's dig in. Welcome to the Film Board. It's January, which used to be the doldrums for films, but in these Wild West days of all streaming and no theaters, it wasn't a struggle to find interesting films to discuss on the Film Board this month. In fact, with our current plans of covering 2 films per month, it actually was hard to narrow it down to just 2. To kick 2021 off, we're starting off with Ramin Bahrani's The White Tiger on Netflix. My name is Andy Nelson, host of The Next Reel, and today I'm chatting with 2 hosts from various Next Reel properties to get their thoughts on this movie so we can share them with all of you. Ocean Murph.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Looking forward to it.
Welcome. And Kyle. How are you, Kyle?
Hey, doing swell.
Excellent. Well, before we begin, let's talk Letterboxd. We are big fans of Letterboxd. It's the perfect social site for movie lovers. You can read, write, and comment on reviews. You can track stats. You can make friends. It's movie lover heaven. Well, Letterboxd is now providing a 20% discount for any Next Reel listener who uses the discount code TheNextReel when upgrading their membership to Pro or Patron status. The benefits are great. I've always been a fan of the statistics, but I also love this new feature where I get actually notified when films on my watch list are added to new streaming services of mine. It is fantastic. So head to thenextreel.com/letterbox and get your own upgraded Letterboxd membership today.
When I first saw him, I knew then this was the master for me. I want to be a driver for your son.
Hey, how much rope?
Hey, don't do that.
Hey, driver!
I'm Pinky. Nice to meet you.
Balram, have you ever seen a computer?
We had many of them in the village with the goats.
The goats are pretty advanced to use computer.
Okay, now you're being a jerk.
I didn't like the way he had spoken about me. Since I was a boy, the desire to be a servant had been hammered into my skull. I, Balram Halwai, I drove the car. I was alone in the car. They made me sign that confession.
Why would you kick him? Why would you hit him like that?
You're my driver!
The White Tiger, Ocean.
Yes.
What did you think of this one?
So my overall impressions, the movie was well acted. I enjoyed the performances and the through line of the story. I thought it was, well done, well paced, good structuring. And I found it to be entertaining. I had one problem that I really found I could not get over, which was the structure of the storytelling. Right.
Interesting.
So after the opening sequence of it is really a mid-movie tease. It's the mid-movie tease of the scene that's going to be our main character, Balram's life-changing event. And then the movie really jumps to the end, right? Where Balram is talking after everything has occurred. Right. And then after about a minute of that, it goes back to the beginning of the story. And then you start to linearly kind of go through the, for lack of a better term, the adventure of Balram and his journey to raise his own status in India. And so I found that because they use that structure and that device, you at the very beginning of the movie, you already know that he gets out of servitude and becomes financially independent and successful. So there's little tension in his stories, and I felt that it really diminished the stakes. So I felt the whole way. Oh, well, I already know what's going to happen because you've told me in the first minute, and I found that to be something where I kind of wished. I couldn't think of a better way for them to structure the movie, but I found that structure caused it to where I wasn't feeling the tension or the angst that you should feel from the story of, is he or isn't he going to make it? Because you've already told me he does.
Interesting. Kyle, how does that all strike you? And what were your initial thoughts of the film?
Yeah, I agree with Ocean almost entirely, so I guess I don't need to say anymore. But no, I agree. But my problem is it was more exactly that there's like, you've already seen it as a successful businessman, so all we know is sort of just, we're just going to see some events as like, there's no narrative tension going through that we're trying to follow into it. If it had been the story of a successful businessman and then says like, but it took a lot to get here, and then you go back and you see how it is, okay, that's a valid story. But my main issue with it was just the style that they used to tell the story. I don't mind fractured narrative. I think it's great. I think, like shaking that stuff up is fantastic. But when you need to like pick something and stick with it, like if you're going to have him writing the email and his voiceover, okay, seems a little clunky now that you just constantly have him voice. But then sometimes he talks to the screen, but sometimes he doesn't. So it's like, okay, you could just have him narrating the story. We've seen that before, and it works really well because the actor then gets to perform and not just record in voiceover. But they did that a couple times, and then that was really jarring. And then sometimes there would be the thing, like even at the end, where everyone's standing together, like sort of they're now part of the meta narrative, like they're part of they're standing there staring at us, and okay, that's interesting, but you didn't do it any other time, so it sort of loses the impact. So I kind of wished the director had just picked a lane and stayed in it, because it felt like he was trying a bunch of different things, and the more different ways they had and the more timelines we went through, the more the tension drooped, and it was sort of like, okay, what's next? And I was never really that on the edge about anything, especially when you start with probably the most dramatic thing that happens. You show it in the first couple minutes, and it's like, okay, so it's a swordfish problem. You show the most exciting thing that's going to happen in your movie right then, and then the rest of the movie is sort of like, oh, well, we've already seen the big thing. I mean, when the murder comes across as like, there's a problem.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually really, really enjoyed this film. I found it to be incredibly compelling and strong. But I have the same issue that you do. I don't think it struck me as problematic as it did for both of you, because I obviously still really connected with this film. I really enjoyed the story and I enjoyed the character's journey. But it was one of those beginnings of a film. I always go back to Brian De Palma's Carlito's Way as the one that struck me the most with this problem, because that's a story that begins with Al Pacino's character. He's, on a stretcher at a hospital. He's going in because he's been shot and he's dying. He's watching the lights overhead go past as he's kicking off his voiceover as it sets up the story. And then you flash back and you have his whole story that leads to that moment. And it really kind of took some power out of the film for me, because I felt like it worked without that. I didn't need that moment at the beginning. And so I did a test. I actually, when I subsequently later showed that film, I watched it again with my wife, and I actually started it like after that. I started it as soon as that ends with the rest of the film. And then I went back and showed her how it began. And she's like, why would they begin it that way? It totally ruins that whole, it takes that punch out. And there is an element of that does get lost, because we're already seeing, now we don't fully see exactly what's happening, but we certainly have the setup for it. And like you said, we get the 3 years later, here he is now as a successful businessman. But I will say, the way that they played that, I don't think they revealed that he was a successful businessman. I just think that they revealed he was successful. And in my head, I was thinking, so is he dealing drugs now? Like, what's he doing? Like, his whole lifestyle seemed totally different. And so I was actually really intrigued to, find out, oh, he's actually running a driving company now. And so I ended up finding that actually worked the way that they set that up. But, I think because of the themes in the story and everything else going on, I guess I ended up finding that it was okay to begin that way, because I felt like, you know what, it's with the themes that we're exploring here, which we'll get into here in a little bit. It might be okay to kind of lead in, because a lot of that also ties into this supposed email he's sending to this Chinese leader who's coming to visit their country, which is kind of the narrative or the narration voiceover that we hear throughout is part of this email,
which ends up not going anywhere.
But it does, and that's what I thought was so funny, because when that guy gets there, it's like it's clear that this guy never has read the email or anything, and it's all in or it's all in Balram's head. And I actually thought that was really interesting, because I'm like, he is in this place now where he sees himself as so much higher up than he really is, but he still is not there. But he's now at a place where he's not going to let that bother him. And now it's almost like he will continue to view, I don't know. It's interesting, because it's almost like, is it a continuation of that whole servant and master thing? And now he's like being this servile person to this other person. I don't know, but I found it to be really, I don't know. I almost laughed out loud at that moment because of the way that it played out.
Well, while we're jumping ahead to that.
We've got some third act problems,
exactly.
but I think we'll get there. But sorry, go ahead, Ocean.
Jump ahead and talk about that, because I have a take on that as well, about that final scene when he talks to the prime minister. But we can save that so when we get to that part of the movie.
Yeah. We'll get there. So Ramin Barani, I don't know if either of you are familiar with his work. He was a very well discussed filmmaker, because he had a lot of critical acclaim for his first two films, Man Push Cart and Chop Shop. One of those, I think it was Man Push Cart. I think Roger Ebert said that it was the best film of the decade, something like that. And this was like in the 2000s. He has had some other big success with some indies that he's done, like, or I shouldn't say big success, but some success, like 99 Homes that he did. But then he adapted for HBO Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury's novel, with Michael B. Jordan starring in it, and that just had terrible reviews.
Yeah, because it wasn't that good.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a tough film to adapt and a tough story to adapt. So I don't know. I mean, do you feel? I mean, I have either of you seen any of his films?
Well, I've seen the Fahrenheit 451 film.
Okay.
I saw that, and that film had a lot of problems. It was a mixed bag there with what's going on in that one. But I think that, though, comparing at or even discussing the two in tandem, I think that they both demonstrate that he's a solid director. The movement and pacing and the performances he's getting out of the actors and all that, it is all a quality product, right? So even though I didn't like Fahrenheit 451, I mean, I recognize that, okay, they're trying some things here, and then the source material is going to handcuff you a little bit. Right. And with this one, there was, even when I think of my quibbles, it really has nothing to do with how it's made or the direction or the pacing or anything. It doesn't even mean that I didn't enjoy the movie. I just felt that because of showing me the end at the beginning made it where I enjoyed it less. But but I think he's looks like a good director. I'm not familiar with much else of his work, so I will, keep an eye out for whenever he makes something else, and that definitely doesn't turn me off to seeing whatever he puts out next.
I had not seen anything that he had done. I knew about the existence of the Fahrenheit 451, but at the time I didn't have HBO, and now that I did, I forgot it existed. Yeah. So, but now with Ocean's recommendation, I don't know that I'm going to make it a high priority.
Right.
Yeah, it's best to have forgotten that it existed. It wasn't.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, the thing is, I can see the quality of his craftsmanship, like the performances he gets out of every actor. Like, not once did I catch anyone acting.
Right.
Like every single one, I never thought like, wow, that guy's doing a great job of acting.
Sure.
Like I was just like, they were the person, they were in the story. I was 100% in there. The production design, like the way they had everything like structured and built, great. It was just the actual how they put the pieces together. That's where I had the biggest problem, the biggest disconnect for me.
One of the pieces of that them putting together that impressed me a lot was the going back and forth between, I believe they're speaking Hindi and English, when they just go back and forth, and how a lot of times in movies, when characters, they would do it mid-conversation. One sentence would be in English, the next sentence is in Hindi. And you would think that would take you out of the film, but, they did such a great job of it that I felt like it flowed easily. I was able to easily follow going back and forth, and at no point in time did that bother me. And I to me, I would credit the director and the editor, in putting that type of structure together to have it where that device doesn't take you out of a film, because it easily could.
Yeah, and even reading the subtitles, like I found it very fluid jumping back and forth to just listening to what they're saying and just looking down and reading the subtitles when they would jump into the other language. I really felt that was effective, and it was very natural too, because I mean I've been in countries where people do bounce between languages, and it is like mid-sentence. I mean, that is how they do it, and so I felt like it was incredibly natural the way that they captured that within the film. So that was pretty exciting to see. So I mean, the film, I mean, it really is about, you know, we have this whole story of poverty, corruption, this class struggle in India. You know, the themes I feel like are pretty overt as far as this idea of, you know, how do you get into this position? How do you get what you want if you're never in a position to get it? This whole idea of learned servitude, which I found, I actually really enjoyed the metaphor that he talked about, the rooster coop that is brought up a number of times.
Yeah.
I mean, I found that all really incredibly effective, especially in India, where that caste system that they talk about a number of times is so prevalent still to this day. And then also seeing the balance of that with, you know, the son and his wife coming back from America and their attitudes about all of this. I found it really interesting. How did all the thematic elements of the story hit both of you as strongly as it did for me?
The rooster coop for me was a big one. I found that not only to be a great device to really, I think, broaden some of my understanding of how the caste system has maintained, right? So whenever I've what's my knowledge of the caste system and how it works. You know, I've known about it educationally how it worked historically, and then I work with Indian people, and so they'll talk about it. But the Indian people I'm working with are all in America, so they've been a little bit Americanized, and then they discuss some of these things. But then how the rooster coop analogy was to me, even personally for me, like almost an aha moment of like, oh, okay, so this is how this system has been maintained, because they then view them viewing themselves kind of as roosters, where even though they see what's going to happen and they see the bad thing, they still don't try to revolt. They don't try to get out of it. They're not going to try to run or escape or anything else. And that how that thematically goes throughout the movie, because there's multiple times where Balram, you feel that you look about what Balram is doing and you feel that he is now finally, he has agency now. He can get out, and he still chooses not to. And I think that the going back to that theme over and over again really kind of shows you not only what he was, where his mindset was at the beginning, or really the first 2/3 of the film, but also, his mindset, but also how much he has to change or give up or sacrifice in order to get out, rebel and break out of the coop.
Yeah, I mean, after the whole accident scene and he signs that paperwork, I mean, his narration there says, not once did I think I had options. I think that speaks so strongly to this idea of what you were saying of the rooster coop. They see what's happening, but they don't do anything to get out of it.
Yeah, that analogy just unlocked it for me. I was sort of like, oh, I now understand, like, from his perspective, how he sees the world. It changed everything, because so many American films and American stories are individual. It's about the guy, it's about the girl, it's about what they want. But this is great because it shows that system, and also how it affects the family. Because in addition to being Balram's story, it's also about his brother, and it's about his grandmother, and it's about his father, like that connection. And then showing us what happens when you break the system, that it's not you that pays the price, it's them. That is another lock on the door, another way of keeping you in the rooster cage. Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that it's only future Balram, the one who's narrating, who knows that.
Yeah.
We're watching him caught in the cage and not knowing that there is a cage until later on, where he's like, I know this now. I wish I had known it then.
That is one thing that I did really enjoy about the narration, is they do take that into account. Like, he has that point where he actually says in the narration, I'm embarrassed about this. I wish I didn't have to tell you, something like that. Yeah. I was like, that's actually, you don't hear that in narration too often. And I was like, that's actually pretty interesting. There's actually like a perspective, that we're getting within that. I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah. And he did it a couple times, not only just discussing the rooster crew, but also when he, the triggering event that got it where he was going to drive Ashok to India. right? That
Right.
what he did to the other driver, outing him as a Muslim,
right, yeah.
making it where then he's fired and he now can't feed his family or anything else like that, and he's ashamed of that moment as well. And so it does, it makes Balram in this movie makes it, for me, by far and away my favorite character, but it makes him really kind of identifiable as a human, in that, like, he's not, this isn't a superhero story, right? This isn't I'm gonna overcome everything story. This isn't I'm so special, so therefore I got out and did this.
Yeah.
It's really showing
it's not Scarface either.
Right, exactly. It's showing an evolution.
This is a character who views himself as an entrepreneur. Like, he's always talking about that, but his nature of talking about it, like when he's younger, it's always in that servile manner where, I'm going to, take charge of my life and become a driver, right? And that's like the whole thing. And then it's like, I'm going to take charge of this by getting rid of the number one driver, so I can as the number two driver, I can move up to that position. And it's a really interesting thing that he never really actually gets to that place of being the real entrepreneur until he's finally able to get out of that mindset, which even after everything happens with the accident, he still can't completely shake right away. It's still like he's still living that for quite a while. And it's also interesting, I think, it speaks to the way that, his the person he's driving for, Ashok, and his wife that we see quite a bit, Pinky, they are kind to him. They've been in America. They don't, and not we're not saying that America's ways are the best. It's just in context of the story, they've like learned something other than this Indian caste system. And now they're both like, why are you hitting the driver? Why are you talking to them that way? All of this sort of stuff. And they're very friendly with him. In fact, the whole accident happens because they're drunk and want to drive, and they have him dressed up like a little Maharaja, and they're doing this whole thing, and they end up getting into the accident. And then after the accident, I did find it interesting that, it's really, Ashok's dad who is pushing. Ashok's dad and the mongoose, like his henchman, I guess we're calling him, who are pushing.
His oldest
brother.
son.
That's the brother. Okay, yeah.
The oldest son.
Right. So, but the two of them are pushing to have the paperwork signed, right? They're the ones really pushing it. And Ashok and Pinky seem very against it, but also, well, I mean, Pinky is kind of her own separate thing because she doesn't like it at all and she leaves. But Ashok is like, he doesn't want to do it, but he's also seems to be like, if we have to go through it, we have to go through with it. And it seems to be one of those things where he's torn with the system, but he still is like, I guess we'll go along with it. He's not running off to America. As he says, this is my home. This is my family. And I feel like he's settling in the system. And it's interesting the way that, even a character like that, who you think is going to find a way through all of this stuff, can't.
Yeah, I guess you give Ashok more credit than I did. Right? I think that Ashok and Pinky both were, they were kind of, American upper class, so they were, they weren't going to hit and berate their servants, but at the same time, they were still like, no, you're still my servant. You're still going to do, do what
you're still carrying the bag.
You're still doing what I want you to do, right? And that. And even throughout the film, the beats of them being nice to Balram or showing him kindness was only when other Indians weren't around. Right. The second any other Indian is around, they revert to kind.
Let's say Ashok. I think Pinky was generally pretty nice.
I would argue same with Pinky when there's a scene where Balram is serving. She has someone over, a guest, a woman's over, and Balram is serving them tea, right? And she flips out on him and hits him. Hits him. And now, granted, he was scratching his groin, but but she flipped out on him. Hit him and smacked him and told him his breath stink and started insulting him and berating him, just like everybody else did. Right now, and then she leaves.
Yeah, it's context. That's true. Yeah.
Right. And then she leaves, the guest leaves, and then Pinky reverts right back to, oh, my bad. I didn't mean to be that mean to you because, you're a good person and I like you, Balram. But yeah, I felt that they were both, in a sense, two-faced in that they knew better. They knew how to treat someone who is your servant or your employee, really. And they knew how to do that. And there's a line, but anytime that they were presented around other Indians and they had any type of peer pressure, they reverted right back to the Indian customs, and they treated Balaram like dirt. And
even when she finally left, she's rich. She could have paid for anyone to take her to the airport, but she knows that she's got some work for him. Knowing either the one opportunity, she knows she's going to get in trouble and doesn't care, or she's not thinking about the repercussions for him at all because she just wants a ride and she knows this is the free way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, and she obviously wanted to give him a gift, right? There's that whole 9,300 that she does give him too. That's
she could have slipped it under his pillow.
She could have handed it to him. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess there is some coming from everybody, but that's so interesting that they all play this two-faced game through this caste system between the servants and the masters, the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. The way that Ashok's dad and brother act with Balaram when they're getting him to sign the paperwork. I mean, they're acting like he's their best friend. And then the next day they're back to like kicking him over and pushing him and swearing at him constantly. They sure love their expressions. Some of the expressions they're constantly calling him.
The stork and the mongoose, I respect them a bit more, right? They were true to themselves the whole way. They were jerks at the beginning, they're jerks at the middle, they're jerks at the end. When they're being nice to them, it's kind of a thing of where you're, as the audience, when you're watching it, you're like, hey, they're manipulating you. They don't all of a sudden like you. They want this out of you. They want you to sign this thing. You understand what you signed away your life, and that's why they're being nice, right? So
that's right. He has no idea how much power he has in that scene.
But I think Balaram recognizes in that scene he has no power. He can't refuse to do it. If he refuses to do it, they can just throw him out. Throw him out, or they can say that, hey, you confessed it to me. He doesn't feel like he has any options. He demonstrated not only in the scene by signing it, which he knew was a false statement, but also then how afterwards he doesn't leave. Because after he's done, he can technically just get in their car and drive off. Right. And be gone, but he doesn't do that, but the stork and the mongoose, since they're manipulative and horrible people the whole way, I found that I respected them more than Ashok and Pinky.
That's like saying you respect the mob hitman or something.
Exactly.
It's like,
that's what they were. They were basically mob bosses, right? But they stayed who they were. They at no point in time were trying to pretend, hey, I'm your friend and I like you, except for, of course, when I'm manipulating you, which is, that's fine.
That's exactly what they were doing. Yeah, no, I'd say they're exactly the same. They're just in a more powerful position because they don't feel the need to be as two-faced because they haven't had that experience from a foreign country. They have always lived in this particular way that the caste system has. And they're always like questioning Ashok, especially Pinky, about like, why are you trying to be so nice to him? He's the servant. And so, I don't know. What a system.
It's interesting how the story unfolds too, because we get to see how it goes. So they're obviously more powerful than Balaram, but then we think of them as being the top, and then we find out they're not because we meet the great socialist, and she's above them and treats them as badly as they treat Balaram. Like, she sets the agenda. She's what's going on. She spits on their floor
on the coffee table.
I mean, and then right, this like whatever this supposedly everyone thinks of her as Gandhi, and yet she's just as much of a mobster as the rest of them.
Right, it's all corrupt.
Just another rung on the cast.
Such a corrupt system. Yeah, really. Yeah. Very fascinating.
One thing about the movie as a whole is it did a really good job of showing the different rungs, right? Not only just, because in Balram's world, it's a two caste system, right? You're either on the bottom or you're on the top, and then that's all the same. Once you're at the top, everyone treats you the same. When you're on the bottom, everyone treats you the same. But really, even in the bottom, right? His grandmother is above him. Right, his grandmother's above everyone else in the family, and judging things. So even inside of that, there's a caste system, and then his exposure to seeing how the rich people live and operate. You see, there is their levels. It is a caste system there as well. It is not as simple as the two caste that he thought existed from the beginning.
And he sees himself as being above the other drivers.
Yes.
even though like technically they're on the same level, but even they see there's something wrong with like he's not playing the game right.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a whole other level going on with just the drivers who all live in the parking garage. Yeah, very interesting. Well, let's talk about some of these performers. Adarsh Gourav, he plays Balram. This is his first leading role, and holy cow, what a performance!
Yeah.
Put him up for the Oscar now, because like, man, like not once did I think of this guy as anything other than Balram.
Exactly.
And he handles like the obsequious nature that he has to deliver when he's like the servant, right? Like as soon as the father comes in, he's like, getting on his knees and, kissing his feet and all that sort of stuff. And it's just like all of that, like he's so delighted he gets to open the door for them in the car, like he handles that so well. And then watching his transition, like watching this system break him, watching him become this white tiger, that one in a generation that can be different, and start really having his eyes open and making the switch. It really was incredibly powerful watching him through that transition as he goes through in the last half of the film.
Because there's kind of three Balrams. There's sort of like and for the three stages of the movie, there's the poor kid who just wants to get out of the town, out from under the thumb of his grandmother. Then you have the one who's trying to play the game, learn the rules, like be a good servant. And then there's the sort of the powerful, thinks he's a master, the fat belly one too. My only regret is that I feel like we got to see from first Balram to second Balram, we got to see that transition, but from second to third, we didn't. I feel like there's a missing piece of this movie. Like after he murders, then next thing he's a businessman. Like there's a whole piece in there where I wanted to see like him transform himself into this guy, as opposed to just, and I got a car and here's a montage and the end.
Yeah, interesting.
I guess I view the transformation as the murder.
Yeah, that's what I would say too.
Right. That's when he.
Well, that's turning. Yeah, I agree. Turning point, but
yeah, and so
he takes that money and he goes and sets it on that guy's desk and is just like, this is for what you're going to do for me. And I was like, okay, I think he's made that switch.
Yeah, because I felt that even earlier through his constant eavesdropping. Right, constant eavesdropping on things, trying to learn things. It was preparing him to where he'd getting enough knowledge of things, and he kind of understood how things worked. He just didn't have the, guts to move forward and act upon this knowledge that he'd now learned, right? And so once he commits the murder and steals the money, right, then he's like, okay, now I'm going to act on and do these things that I've seen the rich people do, so I can then be, a successful businessman, because that's really. At the end of the day, his whole dream is, I just want to be a successful businessman, right? So yes, I felt that was the transformation with the murder.
The transformation, yes. I feel like that part of the story got short shrift. I feel like of like the structure of the thing, like I feel like the third act just sort of like goes fast forward just because they're trying to get to the end as fast as they can. And it's like, I really want to linger in that a little bit more, because I want to see how his experiences have affected him beyond just a voiceover montage.
Yeah, no, I get that. I found that if the movie were longer, or I don't really think it needed to be. It ran, and thinking about it, it was about 2 hours.
No, it didn't
longer.
need to be any longer. I understand why, because we're at a good solid 2 hours.
Yeah, it was a good solid 2 hours. But the relationship with he and the kid, because honestly, I was surprised he went back for him.
Especially because the voiceover says, when I don't return in the morning, I expect that he'll know that he needs to run.
Yeah, exactly. I'd forgotten all about him. And so it changed the scene after the murder when he's standing in the train station holding the bag and he's looking, back at the train. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, he's just nervous because this is his highest window of vulnerability. And it never crossed my mind that the expression I think he was trying to emote was, do I leave the kid or go back for him? Right. Do I take the risk to go back for him? Because he knows this is when he's vulnerable. Once he gets on that train, he's gone. Right. But until then, they can catch him. They can find him. They can do stuff to him. Right. And so the whole risk is, do I go back and get the kid, or do I let him just, fend for himself, and whatever happens to him. But, he went back and he decided to then, get the kid so he could then raise that kid's standard of living as well, get him educated so he could get out and make something of his life. And so it turned out to be a good thing. But I did find that I'd completely forgotten about the kid, and was like, I thought he was just going to leave him and move on.
I'm really glad he didn't, because the way that the interaction with the kid starts, he's taking all of his aggression out about it's clear that Balram feels pinned down because of his connection to his family, right? And we make that clear throughout the course of the film. Like, and you already said this, Kyle, when you do something wrong, it's not just you that's going to get punished, but your entire family will get punished. Like, that is the way that they handle things here. And so that's keeping him from doing anything. But it's like he's finally had that switch flipped in his head by this point. That's like, you know what? I can't let my family hold me back. I have to move forward. And then this kid shows up, and it's like he takes out his aggressions on this kid. But then all of a sudden, like, he stops because he's like, you know, face me again because I'm going to hit you. And then he doesn't. And I feel like there is this moment that he has where it's like it's almost like he sees, like, I could use this kid and mold him to be better even, you know? And I was like, okay, I think that actually really was powerful. And so I was really glad that he ended up coming back for him. Okay, so Balram, we really like Adarsh Gourav. Priyanka Chopra, she's a familiar face, or should be. Are you two familiar with her?
That's Pinky.
As one of the most beautiful women in the world. Yeah, I'm familiar with her. But I mean, she was on. Oh shoot! Now there was the ABC show where she was accused of being a terrorist.
Quantico?
She was in Quantico. That's it. So I watched the first season of Quantico and thought she was fantastic on that.
She was also in Baywatch.
Yeah, that I have not seen.
What?
I missed that one. And she's you can check out We Can Be Heroes. She's
by the Oscars. I mean, you guys are missing a quality movie there.
Or something. Right.
Well,
right.
If you put on Baywatch, have a couple drinks, it's great. So,
okay, there you go. There you go.
Okay. Endorsement for emotion.
Yeah.
Future episode of
right, there you go.
Yeah.
She is going to be in Matrix 4, so I'm curious about that. And of course, she's married to one of the Jonas brothers, I believe, Nick. Mm-hmm. So, but wow, yeah, she's stunning in this film, and I think that she plays a great representation of that American Indian who's coming back to India and is just like seeing this system at work and is just really shocked. I enjoyed her role throughout the film.
And she is a producer on it as well, so I think she was one of the people who got the film made. So it's interesting that she has enough sort of clout and power to do that, and she chose sort of an unflattering role. Like, I mean, she does not come across as the hero. She could have easily found something where she was the main lead. She was, to use the Matrix thing, that she's Trinity. But instead, she found one where it's like a lot more acting has to be done because she's not really that likable by the end. I mean, of the four of them, probably the most likable, but it's the best of the worst.
There's only one likable character in the movie. Everybody else, you can kind of.
But yeah. I mean, obviously, everybody has their issues. I mean, even Balram is making some decisions that are, fairly questionable. If you look at it, it's like, he's killing people here to get out of this. Just
one guy. He was in the way.
Right.
Actually, though, that speaking of the killing, that did surprise me as a decision, as a choice, and I found that I actually had to think a bit about, well, why would you do that? Because they're stopping off enough. They're stopping at enough places here and there. He has a lot of different ways to do it. He could, when he pulled him over, just leave him there stranded on the side of the road and take off, and that does give him a head start. And the only thing I could think of was in his head that really one of two things. One, he was partly being logical of, okay, well, if he's dead, I know no one's going to even think to look for me until tomorrow, right? Because they have to find his body and do that. Whereas if he leaves him on the side of the road or doesn't come, leaves him at a drop-off point and takes off, someone may call and then they start looking for him within the hour. And then the second one was, I think that maybe in his own mind, he was like, it has to be a clean break. Right. Like I'm going to do to you what you would do to me and my family if I left. Like I have to do this horrible clean break, because I did feel that I had a mixed emotions with the murder, where on the one hand, I felt it was unnecessary. But on the other hand, I mean, I didn't care about Ashok enough to be like, well, if he lives, he dies, whatever. Right. As long as Balram makes it, which I knew he was gonna, then I was fine.
Would it have changed your emotional state if it had been Pinky? Or if it had been like, let's say the two of them. If it had been
Pinky, possibly, because Pinky really only had situational power, right? Because she was married to Ashok. then that's where her power lied, right? But at the end of the day, she didn't have any real power over him, and she wasn't really stopping him from doing anything, right? You know, her power was really more go through Ashok, and Ashok exerted his power over him, and that's what kind of drove the various decisions he made, you know, and what he did. And so, yeah, so had it been Pinky, I think it would have been different, but then also had it been Pinky, I don't think it would have been a, you know, as much of a cathartic thing. That then it would have just kind of been a cold-blooded murder, right? Because now you're killing someone that isn't really stopping you directly.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's I feel like I can agree with that to a certain extent, but I also feel like it had to be Ashok because, or perhaps the mongoose was another person that I was thinking maybe that's who he's going to get, or he's going to kill the mongoose and then he's going to take the letter and flee. But it all made sense because it had to be around this red duffel bag full of money. And so I figured it had to be Ashok that he was going to get it from. And Pinky, I mean, she was such an outsider within the family anyway. Like they didn't want Ashok to marry her because she was a different caste and because, she's been educated in America and she doesn't like the way that they treat women, that they treat anybody here. And so she has a very different mindset to his entire family and, is ready for divorce, really. I mean, by the time we get to the end of this film. So I would have had a hard time seeing it work with Pinky as the one in the car, but Ashok or his family, I think, really would have been the only way for it to play out for me.
Yeah.
So we like Priyanka as Chopra. Do we like Rajkumar Rao? He plays Ashok. What did you think of his performance?
I thought he was fantastic. I thought he played the great of he comes in as sort of like, oh, it's the reasonable one. It's the nice guy.
Yeah.
Like we've seen the powerful father and the mean brother, and now here's the nice brother, and he's the one who's going to be kind. And then as we see that he is just as corrupt as them, he just is either convinced himself he's not as bad, or he's just really good at showing off to the other one. Because and that scene, especially where you really get to know what he's like, is when they're making him sign the paper, and it was sort of like, no, don't make him do it. Well, okay,
yeah, exactly.
You really see the privilege right there. He's like, oh well, it benefits me, so okay, sorry, buddy.
It only benefits me tangentially. Yeah, no, I think that. Yes, right. I think his performance was great. I thought he was very. Believable. I don't know. When I looked up his information, I thought he grew up in India. So if he's doing an American accent or an American sounding accent, it sounded he sounded a lot like someone who left India at 12 and then, grew up in America. He did a great job emoting and providing that impression. So I agree completely with what Carl was saying in that he provided that impression, but then as it turns out, he is the low man on the totem pole in his family. Right. And that his words, while Balram views it as, hey, I'm being protected by a high ruler, a high mighty person. And it's like, no, you're being protected by the least of your problems. Right. And so that he just doesn't have enough power or will to, effect the change that he wants. Right. He can't get the servants treated better. He does roll over about the signing of the confession. He also goes along with the bribes. Even though he thinks the bribes, initially they're arguing against the bribes, right? And so he then goes along with the bribes because he just, he basically rolls over at any point in time when the stork or the mongoose say, this is how it's going to be here. Do you want to fix it? Right. Because even when he's given that option where they're like, okay, fine, you fix this problem. And then he's like, no, never mind. We'll do whatever you think.
Yeah. He talks a big game, especially to Pinky, but at the end of the day, he's just one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But his performance, I guess, as the actor. Sorry, I guess that was the original question. I went off on a tangent. The performance was great. It was great. Yeah.
Which I know, which is a great thing because like just that amount of subtlety, that's hard to do.
It is. And so I really enjoyed his performance. I mean, at the end of the day, there was no one whose performance I didn't enjoy. I mean, even goodness, I look up the name of the lady. The lady that played
the cab driver. I mean, that guy was great too.
Great.
He was great. I mean, like, just a completely like. I love when you get to see something from a culture that's not yours, like that. Basically, a window into something else, and you get to see somebody who's like, I have no antecedent to this. I have nothing that's like this. And this guy come up like, I don't know what he was after, what his goals were, what he was trying to do, but I was fascinated by that because I'm like, I want to know that guy's story because it was so different than anything I'd seen before. And so once again, just a minor, fifth tier character or whatever.
I
Still
think
great.
in a lot of ways, which is not, this is just my opinion, and I could very well be wrong, but I think in a lot of ways, that cab driver represented what in Balram's head, what he wanted to get to was that, right? When he first goes off to be a driver and everything like that, I think he viewed at that point, he was like this, because if you think about Balram early, what this guy has is arguably true independence. He's the number one driver. He's going back and forth. He's talking to the other guys. He has a lot of status in the driver community. So, whoever because, they're all servants for somebody. So whoever he's a servant for has enough latitude, or, given him enough latitude of freedom where it appears like he's in charge. Like he's always just kind of out and about, and then he's always in charge of the other drivers. And so I think that he represents what Balram thought his dreams was. And then once he got around to, where he's really interacting, engaging with this person, he realizes, I need to dream bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. And it becomes a cautionary tale.
And you get that conversation at the end or toward the end of their quote relationship in the film, where he's talking to that guy who runs the head of the drivers or whatever. And he's saying like, what do you see as your future? And he's just like, maybe I'll make enough money and, because they're going to boot you by the time you're 55 and that's it. You're going to be on your own. So hopefully you have enough money to make a life for yourself, because if not, you're screwed. Yeah. And that was like, wow, this is what you have to look forward to after all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. That was great.
No, it really was a stellar cast. Like every part, I really enjoyed watching all of these people on screen, whether it was his dad. And I love that little, I liked these moments that Bharani has throughout the film. And I'm assuming that they were in the original novel too, that Aravind Adiga wrote. But like that moment when he's driving and he just has that moment where he sees his father on the motorbike next to him, and his dad's talking to him through the car window, and just has a thing to say to him, a little bit of wisdom, and then but it was all just in his head. But I was like, I really liked the way that Bharani was directing little moments like that throughout the film that really kind of put us into Balram's head.
Yeah, I wish there had been more of that.
Yeah, it only happens a couple times, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I still really liked it. Well, we talked about the story structure already as far as the way that the film kind of unfolded and everything. Outside of that, everything going on with the narration and everything at the beginning, where we're seeing the not the murder, but the car accident, kind of we're seeing the lead up to the car accident, and then we're seeing kind of the setup for his narration, which is him writing this letter to this Chinese diplomat who's coming to visit. How does the rest of the story structure work for you? Do you feel that just everything works the way that it's being told here?
Yeah, I think that showing the end of the movie at the beginning is the fatal flaw of the story structure. Beyond that, it is a compelling, well-paced movie. The progression of things, I feel that as you kind of go with Balram on his journey, not only do you accept and you're willing to have him grow, you feel frustrated when he doesn't grow quite at the pace you want, right? When Pinky leaves and he does the only thing I could think of was it was like an Alfred where he's gonna put Ashok back together again, right? He's like, I'm gonna take care of you, Ashok. We're gonna put it together. He's lying to him about things that Pinky's didn't say just to build him up and make him better, because he still is in the mindset of, I'm going to be with this guy and we're going to be together, as master and servant, for life. And I'm going to, that is going to be my achievement. And then once he gets turned on yet again, after doing all that, after, taking him basically out of a drunken stupor, building him up, getting him fed and getting him back on his feet, he's then turned on again and treated like trash. I think that's when, then you see, then you're like, okay, maybe now he's going to finally do it. And then still he doesn't. And so you find that the structure of it, I think, is great, because you find that you're with him through the journey, but then you're almost frustrated he's not going fast enough for you now, because now you're like, hey, you got 93,000 rupees. What was it, 93,000 rupees? Is that what Pinky gave her? You can steal the bag. You realize he's a dirtbag now. We can go on, right? And it's like, no, we still need to hang out some more and do this more things. And so if you're having that, to me, if you're having that reaction to his story, that then to me that is a sign of really good structure and really good storytelling, because I'm invested in this character, I care about what happens to that character, and I have my own hopes and dreams for the character as the movie goes on.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I wish that we had sort of seen less of future. Like have him narrate, that's fine, but every time they would cut to him like in the future, like the thing, it sort of took all of it deflated the whole story. And it was like, okay, so then like, okay, we got to catch back up again, because they would build up to these really narrow things where you're with Balram and all these terrible things that he has happened to him or is doing, and then all of a sudden you cut to like, and everything's going to be fine though. Like, don't worry, like no matter what, he's going to be successful and rich and it's going to be great. Like, don't worry, like it's fine. But I don't want that. Like, let me stay in the nervousness. Let me stay in the tension. Even though we have a narrator, like basically guiding us through. That I found that. I mean, I'm sure that was a novel, and in a novel that works. But I don't think in a movie you really, really have to have a really, really strong editorial feel to make that work. And here I just didn't think it did, because it sort of took away from the quality of the movie. So that's the thing is, I know I feel like I'm banging on about this. I didn't hate this movie, but I feel like there's such great stuff here that the structure is getting in the way of the great story.
Yeah.
With all of the flashbacks to him in the future, the 2010 story, did either of you feel like this was like he was a successful businessman, or was it only me who was like, is he a drug dealer? Like, what's he doing now? Like that was my place.
I got that impression from the trailer. The trailer made me think that was where it was going to end up, with him as a crime lord of some sort. But then when it was when it was revealed that he was like sort of just a businessman, it was like,
yeah, I got
okay.
the different
So there still was that surprise. Yeah.
I for me, it wasn't.
Yeah.
I got that impression from the trailer that there was White Tiger driving, and he was a successful businessman and owned a driving company. That's what I always thought. I think that, and I think Colin hit the nail on the head about, there's a lot of that with the narration. The almost better part of the story structure would have been kind of what you said. You can keep the narration, just don't ever show us him in 2010 until it's 2010, right? Until you're at the end, right? Because most everything he says, you can even accept the narrative of, okay, he is narrating to me from the future tense, but I don't know what that future tense is or what his scenario is, because he could be narrating to me from a jail cell. He could be narrating to me because this is the last moments of his life and he's been killed, right? The
mongoose is coming up the stairs.
Exactly. Yeah, he could. Yeah. So, but the fact that I know where he's narrating from does diminish the stakes. And so if you just don't show him, especially in a movie, you're right. If you just don't show him, then I think it becomes a much more powerful story.
It's a perpetual problem anytime you introduce narration into a film like that, especially when it's the narration of, this is that person at the end of the film who is narrating you through the whole context of the film. I feel like that always ends up becoming a challenge. But it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like they're doing an effective enough job with it here, but that I'm able to look past it and just kind of go with the film and enjoy the film for what it is, despite these issues that I have with that.
In terms of narration stuff, the one pop culture thing that occurs to me, that I remember when a narrator started that I knew the movie was dead, like right from then. I sat down and watched, and I bought my ticket and sat down, and the movie started, and it was Green Lantern.
Oh.
And the text came up on screen, and then someone started reading the text to me, and I'm like, it's done. Like, it's like, you're not going to recover from this. I'm like, it's just going to go down from here, and that's exactly what happened. So I'm always very nervous when there's a narrator, because I've seen it done badly almost more times than I've seen it done
for anyone
well.
listening, this movie is exponentially better than Green Lantern.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was just making a pop culture comparison for narration trouble.
Yeah, you want to be.
Please don't ever put those two in anything.
Be careful when you're throwing around Green Lantern as a comparison to anything. So here's a question for both of you. This is an interesting film to release right now, I think. I mean, how do you feel it fit into kind of like the zeitgeist and just kind of the conversations of the day that are happening these days?
I think that it's the fit of it dealt to me more with educating people that aren't familiar with the Indian culture about the culture. Right. That is for me. And I'll own that it's selfish the way I'm thinking about it. But for me, that is what I really felt this movie did well. There's a lot of things just about Indian culture that I didn't know that when you, and through this movie, then there are other things where you see, other Indian people, things that they do, how their culture is structured, and like that now I feel more informed. And I feel that is really one of the great services it's providing outside of the country of India. I mean, it's a great story, right? But, if you saw this story in India, right, you're already familiar with these cultural norms. So this would be like, okay, well, I understand the story, right? But for me, outside of it as an American, I find that, well, now I feel I'm educated more about your culture. And I think that is the great, as far as the zeitgeist goes now, that is the great service you're providing, is that now the more education other cultures have about your culture, the better.
I agree. And I stand with you in ignorance, because I was the exact same way. Like I knew nothing. So this was a glimpse into a world that I did not know at all. And I also like the fact that they mentioned the other glimpse into this world that most people know, which is Slumdog Millionaire. They actually mention that. They make an offhand reference to it in the movie, which I thought was great, because most people, that's the only other time they've seen this much of Indian culture. And
Lion. Let's not forget Lion, which came out a few years ago.
I had forgotten Lion, which came out a few years ago. So yeah, it shows you the depths of my ignorance. Yeah. But in the same way, but I'm not saying that this is now I understand Indian culture. Like this is just a representation, and it doesn't represent all in India any more than like Godfather 2 represents all of Italy. Like it's just like one story in a world, in a setting that I had not seen a lot of stuff in, and I'm anxious for more people to make stories in this setting, because I think it shows how a rich, diverse world this can be, and all the different things we can do, and especially with the language thing, the language going back and forth. Because when it starts down, everyone's talking English. I was like, did they really just make this just for people who speak English? And then when they started going back and forth, I was like, oh, good.
Right.
I was afraid that it was sort of like, let's make something for the dumb white people who don't understand anything. But it was then once I understand that. Like, okay, you're letting us see into this world, which I was appreciative of. I was
wondering that too, because it is on Netflix, and I'm like, maybe Netflix was mandating them to say you've got to do it all in English, because Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon 2, they did. The whole thing was it was dubbed in English, and you can't get the original language here in the States. But Ramin Bahrani, I mean, he is an American director. He was born in the States, and I don't know his full background, but I loved that he chose, like, the films that he makes tend to seem like he's really getting into the various cultures that he's telling the stories of. And so I really appreciate that. It feels very much like he is in this culture. And what I love about the theme of this, with the whole the battle between the rich and the poor, I actually feel like this is really a very relevant story to today. And his whole idea about, like, from where I am, the only way out is either to, climb your way out or to go into politics, is what he said, which I thought was very funny. And in the context of everything going on in the world, in the U.S., especially in the last few years.
That's true. I mean, because luckily in America, we don't have a class system. But it's interesting, because in America, like, basically we just pretend it doesn't exist. Yeah. But in India, it is very much defined. But it still is the story of, if you have not, the haves aren't going to give you anything.
Exactly.
And one of the best lines of this movie was, the rich never give you anything unless they're going to take something from you.
Yeah.
And that's when he was going to do that. And I was like, ooh, wow, that line hit hard.
That was when he found out he was getting replaced, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, really, really great film. Well, let's start closing this thing up. Last remarks from you two. Last thoughts on this film.
I think that for me, I guess the last part, we've really kind of delved deep into what I really find about it as a whole, in that, try to forgive that knowing the end at the beginning, right? But beyond that, it is a well acted, well done movie that is not only entertaining, but definitely educational about a slice of Indian culture. And so I think that it is I'm glad that I saw it, and it's going to, I think, help inform me not only, when I see other Indian movies, but also, just, when you see things either on the news or about people, or you interact with people, that you could then start to understand just a little bit more about, where they're coming from and where their culture is, so that, we can kind of bridge that gap to where we all understand each other a little bit better.
Yeah, yes to all that. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it got made. I'm glad that it's on Netflix where everybody can get to see it, because I think it is a really important story, and I think it's a well done one. Like I said, all my problems are with structure. But don't let that stop you from going to see it, because I think it is a great show. And I'm interested to know how much is similar to the novel. So I didn't want to know that before having this conversation. But I'm going to go look it up now to see the differences and similarities and stuff too. But yeah, I think it's a great story for now, and to show that there are more stories than can be told around the world that can be universally accessible.
Yeah, and I love that Netflix is pushing stuff like this. I think that's fantastic. Agreed. All right, gents, Letterboxd. Over on Letterboxd, you can rate it up to 5 stars, and you can add a heart. What would you two give it on Letterboxd?
I'd give it 4 stars and a heart. I think that the movie's great. I think my quibble with the structure does definitely knock it down a point. But beyond that, so now that I'm thinking about it, I think it'd be 4.5 and a heart, right? Because I really enjoyed the movie and I really liked it, and I just knock off about a 0.5 point because I didn't like knowing what happened at the end. But the movie itself is really good. It's really well done. I really like Balram. I don't care about the other characters, but
in a way you're not supposed to.
Exactly, in a way you're not supposed to. I don't care about anyone else, but so I find I'd be somewhere in that 4.5, but definitely with a heart.
I'm gonna go 3, mostly because while I enjoyed it, I don't think that I would go back to it. That always is what sort of bumps me up to the next level, and then my structural problems keep it from going there. It is a quality film that I think everybody should see, but I don't find it as going into any of my top whatever lists.
Would you give it a heart?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm with you, Ocean. 4.5 from me. The structure of the way that the story was framed, I did struggle with a little bit, but otherwise, I was totally invested in this film. I loved these characters. I loved this story of this struggle to try not being stuck in the rooster coop. I really enjoyed it. So 4.5 stars and a heart from me. So.
I'm just going to get roasted. I can tell. People are going to be like, how could you?
Yes.
I think you clearly enjoyed the film still.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to say people are going to see that, we're going to, as we talked about in the pre-show, they're going to just look at the rating and go, what's wrong with him?
I like I think that rating system makes sense. I like the caveat, right? That it's a great movie, but if I'm not going to watch it again, that is a 3 star. And I would view it the same way. Whereas I think about this, and I've already seen it. I would argue 1.5 times now, and I do have plans that there's other people that I want to expose this movie to. So I do plan to see it again, and I will enjoy doing so. But you're right. If I would. Any movie that I enjoy that I would only watch once, I think 3 stars is appropriate. It's still that doesn't make it a bad movie.
And that's what I hope people who just look at the rating will understand.
I'm preemptively defending you, Kyle.
Well, that's why we like the hearts. That's why we like the hearts, because I think there's a big difference between a 3-star film with a heart and a 3-star film without a heart.
Absolutely,
I think that's true. So, well, everybody, we have one more film we're going to be talking about this month. Next week. Very quickly, it's right around the corner. We're actually looking at Fisher Stevens' film Palmer over on Apple TV+. We're going to be targeting a recording early Saturday morning, January 30th, for any members who want to join us for the pre-show chat in Discord or watch the live stream of the show, and then we should have the episode out on Sunday. I'm going to be joined by Tommy and Mandy, so make sure you check Palmer out and then tune in for that show. Don't forget to join our online community with fellow movie lovers. Learn more at thenextreel.com/discord. And if you're interested in supporting us to help keep the lights on and get some great benefits while you're at it, head to thenextreel.com/membership. Kyle, Ocean, thanks for coming, joining me to talk about The White Tiger tonight.
Yes, thank you. Really enjoyed the experience. Liked the movie and really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I don't know that I would have this would have popped up on my radar if it hadn't been a pick. So
great.
Thank you for spotlighting it and letting more people see it, including myself.
Absolutely, that's what we're here for. Well, the next reel, when the movie ends, our conversation begins.